All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming today. On behalf of CohereOne and Blue Tangerine, we'd like to welcome our clients and prospects to the webinar today. Also, as many of you know, CohereOne is now a proud member of the Midland Paper and Packaging Group of Companies. Many of our Midland clients and prospects are also on today's call, and we want to extend a warm welcome to them as well. Most importantly, we hope that everyone on the webinar and their loved ones are staying healthy in the face of the global health crisis. I also want to mention a little bit of housekeeping that this webinar will be recorded, and the recording as well as the presentation notes will be available in a few days. We'll send out a follow-up email to make sure that you receive those, and that will include the password to access the recordings and presentation. So with that, I'm going to go here. If it will let me. There we go. So one of the first things we wanted to start off talking about was that even though we're in the middle of this crisis, one of the things that's very important, what we're noticing is that shopping habits are changing, but consumers are still spending. That's been probably the most important takeaway at the early onset. Another element that's beginning to play out a lot more, especially when you consider the media shift, is every day is being treated like a Black Friday. Consumers are responding to promotions by buying more for less. Traffic and transactions are up, but average orders are down. And that's actually spanning across multiple types of verticals. People have more opportunities to browse, and so they're spending more time looking for sales and opportunities to buy things at a discount where they may not necessarily otherwise have that. Of course, with millions of people across the US working from home, retailers need to keep a careful watch on how shoppers are interacting online. It's important to note that behavioral change. We are seeing in some instances a significant amount of time shifting from mobile to desktop traffic. And so that's one of the big takeaways that we need to be watching for. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the state of the industry. Now, our great friends and partners at ListTrack provide some of the best information for the retail industry that we've seen. So each week they update this site, and it has e-commerce revenue from over 850 US retail stores. So the first snapshot I'm going to show you here, this goes up through March 25th. Runaway winners include firearms, toys, sporting goods, camping, any of the outdoor gear, as well as some of the industrial titles. Some of the early losers came in the apparel category, although we continue to see certain elements of apparel outperforming others. For example, women, athleisure, movement titles are still outperforming their counterparts in the men's space. So it was important for us early on to understand and digest what was happening as the shock of what was happening around the globe began to set in. Now, as we take a second look here, and specifically we look at the next update. So let's go back there. If you look at the area in blue, that was what was covered on the previous slide upwards through March 25th. So this next slide here is an update and takes us through April 9th. I can sum it up with one word: volatility. One additional observation: runaway winners early on are flattening out considerably, whereas titles or stores that were flat have increased just shy of 20%. A lot of that is keyed up related to how we respond in a crisis. The panic mode sets in. Certain types of purchases, including those firearms and some of the industrial and paper goods, those were consumed very early and drove a lot of demand. Now, in hindsight, what we're seeing is those beginning to flatten out as more of a natural everyday rhythm to the crisis unfolds. Titles in decline have remained fairly flat in terms of their decline. They haven't moved one way or the other, but you can tell from the chart that overall there are definitely peaks and valleys in terms of those percentages. Now, this next slide deals a little bit more specifically with marketing cost. So it's really, really important to maintain a high degree of visibility on media cost, especially during a crisis. So while postal and email costs have remained relatively flat, most retail brands especially have experienced very significant inflationary pricing increases in their paid media campaigns. So while globally you may read stories about CPMs or cost per thousands may be down, subsectors such as general retail have seen some extreme inflation. For example, one client of ours saw their cost increase over 180%. Recently, we've also been noting Bing shopping campaigns and PLAs have increased by over 100%. So that was as of this week. So it really is a very fluid situation, but what we want to make sure we understand is how are those costs being deployed and how are we accounting for those in the overall marketing spend, especially in a time where budgets are under tight consideration. Now, as we pivot and talk a little bit more about the state of the industry from the home builder perspective, I wanted to show you this slide. So here's a sample of 4 large home builders showing traffic for the last trailing 8 weeks. Here you'll notice 2 graphs showing all site traffic as well as direct and organic, which is on the right. Now, it's important to note that direct and organic search, which are shown here on the right, are 2 elements that the home builder really can't easily influence by turning off media or going dark. Now, you'll also notice some interesting parallels here. Notice that both graphs show a steep decline followed by a recovery. We're seeing something very similar on the retail side. March 12th here is denoted with a dotted line. That was the day a lot of the cancellations began to go mainstream, such as the NBA, Major League Baseball, and some of the subsequent notes about going under lockdown in some of the major cities. So it was a good for us to kind of take a snapshot in time and see how that was all unfolding, both pre and post that timeline. So also specifically to home builders, some information came out yesterday that home sales declined or would decline, by 15% in 2020 due to the COVID-19 coronavirus. Now, expectation is that driving that decline will be a downturn in existing home sales. That would likely be more in most instances similar to this, but the limited inventory that's been on the market should help cushion some of that blow. Now, also, Home Builder Confidence Index took the largest monthly dive ever as the coronavirus slammed the economy. So that's not necessarily unexpected. And that, by the way, does go back in history to the beginning of the survey, dating back in January of 1985. So we do have some pretty good history here from which to judge that. As well as the National Association of Home Builders and the Wells Fargo Housing Marketing Index, which many of you probably do follow, builder confidence for single family homes plunged 42 points to a reading of 30 in April. So for reference, the housing market index was expected to fall to 55. Anything above 50 is considered positive. So now as we get into some of the more very specific items for you to consider, I am going to turn this over now to Phillip Mejia, who is the Senior Paid Search Specialist for our partners at Blue Tangerine. Phillip, go ahead and take it away.
All right. All right, so what I did here is I put together some top tips for some of our paid search and what we've been noticing and what we're doing to try and write out over the next 60 days. All right, give me... Okay, whoops. One too far. There we go. So what I've done here is I kind of line listed a number of items and areas that we've noticed a major shift in behavior for our paid search clients. So I picked out some of the top areas that we think should be optimized. Obviously, if you have a brand search and non-brand search and remarketing, as well as shopping, depending on the niche market that you're in. There are 5 areas that we've noticed optimization has really been important over the last couple of weeks and, like I said, the next 60 days. The first thing is automated bidding. Over the last year, Google has been big on having you migrate over to any AI performed functions within the Google Ads arena. Bing is doing very similar. However, all of that automated bidding and things like that aren't necessarily able to adjust to our current situation. And so you'll want to take a look at anything that you do have automated and potentially bring it down to a manual intervention, or just review the data to make sure it's still performing as well as it should have. The other area that we're taking a closer look, as Tim had mentioned, is in the device section. The migration between mobile and desktop, again, depending on the market, has been pretty significant. We had been seeing this migration away from mobile devices onto the desktop, but as time has gone on, and there's more people within a household, now we're starting to see a bit of jockeying for devices. So now that maybe 2 of the breadwinners are at home, maybe they only had 1 desktop device, now they're having to share other devices across that. So you really need to pay closer attention on how your bidding is set up for those devices. Competition. Auction insights is one of the bigger areas that a lot of people don't pay too close attention to, specifically in the non-brand search as well as the shopping campaigns. But if you're in the e-commerce environment, one of the big things that we've noticed is Amazon has really fallen off on a number of places. And if Amazon has been a big piece of your competition, it would be good to take a look and see if they've fallen off, or how far they've fallen off, or if they've taken up a bigger presence. In many of our cases, we've noticed Amazon has taken a bit of a back seat during this particular time. Audiences. So audience is another big piece. If you're not using audiences currently to layer on top of your campaigns and such, now would be a good time to either review that or take a look at that. Some of the audiences that we always review is the demographics. So we want to understand our gender mix as well as the age and income bracket mix. Location is important. Some of the things that we've been noticing on the location front is, obviously, as people kind of pull back on their hours or start working from home, we don't necessarily see the same areas as doing as well as previous, and new areas are starting to emerge as we look at some of that geo-targeting. The other thing along the lines of audiences would be customer lists, your Google remarketing list, and then any affinity and customer intent list. Again, in recent time, a lot of that behavior has changed. If you haven't updated your customer list in the last quarter, now would be a good time. Again, that mix is changing pretty rapidly at this point in time. And then finally, the other piece of this is your networks and apps. So if you have your ads displaying across multiple networks, like the search network, partner network, display network, or any of the apps, now's a good time to review that. One of the things here, again, is migration of a lot of that traffic. If you've seen success in the past on certain networks, review those. Again, times have changed and things may look different at this point in time. And keeping in line with that, one of the things that we found that did well for us recently was going through and optimizing what apps our ads are showing. So I've outlined a little quick step-by-step on how to optimize some of those apps. What we found that worked well for us was reducing our exposure on the game apps. Over the last few weeks, we've noticed an increase in gaming. No surprise, as people are reducing their hours or being laid off, there's going to be an increase in other things that are going to keep their attention. We've also noticed productivity apps have seen an increase as well. So again, you want to take a closer look at the apps that your ads are showing on, and either exclude any of those apps or add any apps that you really want to target. So what we did, again, the initial test, we took a 10-day look at some adjustments that we made when we went through and optimized against the gaming apps. After 10 days, we did see our clicks go down about 10%. The click-through rate increased by 11%. And that's partially due to the fact that we didn't have as many impressions showing out there. The big area was our conversion rates. Conversion rates went up significantly, and we saw this not only with our e-commerce clients, but with our lead generation clients as well. And across the board, we saw CPC rates fall about 6%. So that was an extra bonus that we had noticed from that optimization itself. All right, I'm gonna go on to our next section and talk a little bit about keyword review. Two big areas on the keywords that we always take a look at. And again, we're always looking at brand search, non-brand search, any remarketing or display that you might be doing, and then on-site search. So for us, nearly all the traffic that goes to your website starts by a keyword search, whether it's on Google, Bing, or some other search engine. And a lot of times when people are starting their initial search, it's usually a fairly broad search that people will start with. And so you always want to take a closer look at your search query reports, especially now for high cost terms with no conversions. You want to take a look at the terms that are coming in. One of the things that we started noticing end of February and through most of March were really highly related terms to viral, virus, wipes, toilet paper, paper towels, surgical masks, surface cleaners, social distancing. And what we found was there were a number of products or services that may have included some of these terms in there. And so people were not necessarily reading the ads that we had out there, but just clicking on everything. And so we actually developed a COVID-19 negative keyword list that we apply to different markets and clients that we have. Again, some clients do sell products that are related to the COVID-19 and they've got stock, and we want to make sure those continue to push. But we have some clients that may sell things that sound similar to some of these items that aren't necessarily used for these items. And so you'll see lots of cost associated with that, but no conversions. And so again, keep close eye on the search query report to really understand what's been happening over the last month or so. The next piece of this that a lot of people don't necessarily pay too close attention to, but we've been finding some good success with it recently, is your on-site search. If you have an on-site search, I recommend tracking anything that people are searching for on your site. You're going to be able to see very specific terms and volume of what people are actually looking for once they get to your site. And along those lines, again, I kind of put a little tip out here on how to set up your on-site search for tracking. Again, this is valuable data. These are what people are looking for once they've gotten to your site, whether they went to your site looking for one thing or another, or even if they looked you up by your brand. And now they're really doing a very precise setup or search here for that. So what you want to do is within your Google Analytics, you're going to want to navigate to your admin, select the view that you want to take a look at on that page. From there, you're going to take a look at your view settings, kind of have this listed out here on the images. When you get a copy of this, you'll be able to kind of walk through that. Down on the page itself, it'll ask you to set up your site tracking. If there are very specific parameters to setting that up, it'll ask you to set those in there. Literally within a few hours, you should start to see within Google Analytics, what people are searching for on your site. Again, these are very, very specific searches, and most likely people are converting pretty quickly on those terms. All right. Moving on, I just want to go on to the next section, which is going to be utilizing audience lists. I talked a little bit at the beginning about this, and I want to break down the audience list and what I believe you can get the most bang for the value here. So on the audience list within paid search, we have the ability to layer audiences onto a multitude of our campaigns. The first I have listed here is the customer list, which you might know as a house file. So within the house file, you have the ability to upload data into Google as well as Bing and even Facebook. From that, you're able to layer that onto your campaigns. It does a great job of matching against people who are searching for things, and your ads can tend to show up higher up next to those search queries when people are looking for it once you've layered that on. So there's some great opportunity there. In addition to that, there is the Google remarketing list. So if you've set up coding with Google Ads as well as Google Analytics, you have the ability to create your own remarketing lists. So if they came through Google Ads and they did specific things on the website, you can create a list off of that. If you wanted to pull a much granular list, you can also create lists in Analytics. Analytics has a multitude of metrics to pull from, and there's a number of different ways to slice and dice that data to really get granular if you needed to. And then finally, one other list that we like to use here on a number of our campaigns are the custom affinity and custom intent lists. And the way that these work are, the affinity lists are generally users who have shown a history of a pattern of searches and visits to websites. You know, these are most likely people who are hobbyists, or these are things they do on a regular basis, versus the custom intent list, which is a little bit more granular, still based on the same history, except that these are more life event related. So something recently happened that they're doing these searches. And so it's a more recent type of thing. And like I said, so it's a little bit more granular versus the affinity where, you know, somebody who likes to do quilting are always visiting fabric sites, sewing sites, and any other type of blogging for quilting sites. So that would be kind of the difference between those. But again, these are lists that are going to be useful and help you tailor and ensure that your message is reaching the right people, especially during these times. All right. So what I wanted to do here, since I mentioned a bit ago about creating an on-site search audience, tracking your on-site search keywords. From those keywords, you can actually create an audience of those keywords. So here again, I've kind of stepped through some of the areas within Google Analytics, kind of set that up. I've kind of outlined the steps on here. Very, very simple. You know, everything within your admin starts at the gear itself. Here, you'll be able to navigate to the audience definition, identify that you want to create audiences. Once you're able to create that step, Google then opens up, and then you get this wonderful section here in item D that really shows you all the options that are available to you. And like I said, right now, getting to the detailed level of who you're going after is really going to help improve your overall performance, because there is going to be a lot of noise coming right now. Like I said, lots of people at home, nothing else to do except searches and kind of take a look at what's out there. So within that audience selection, you're able to identify different builder options here. You could go to your conditions, which is what you would do for this. From the conditions, you would then navigate to different filters of the search terms that you have started tracking. From those search terms, you take a look at the last 30 days, what your best search terms have been. From that, you create a search term list of those great terms. And now you have a remarketing list to then layer onto a campaign related to those terms, or you can now start to show people a banner ad about that particular category related to those terms. So again, you're really being a bit more granular about who you're going after and when you're going after them. All right. This next piece isn't so much about, you know, either lead generation, home builders, or e-commerce. It's really going to be focusing on e-commerce. This is related to anyone who's got a product feed, a shopping feed that's out there right now. One of the big things we've noticed across the board, and I don't know that everyone has had a chance to see this, is that in March, towards the mid to late part of March, Google updated their inappropriate content policy. This policy is really centered and very specific about anything related to disinfectants, masks, or anything to that effect. Basically, they think that if you're selling a product that is mask related, whether it's masking tape, facial mask, or Halloween mask, or anything to that effect, they think that now you are trying to capitalize on a sensitive event. What we've been finding is, you know, we had a number of products that got disapproved pretty quickly. Little by little, we've been going in and getting them manually approved. And then all of a sudden, we'll get another list of products that have now come under capitalizing on sensitive events. So you need to really stay on top of this. Like I said, this filter is pretty broad. Have a few clients that do sell wall masks that are decorative, and many of those got disapproved. And like I said, so you really got to pay close attention to what's happening on your shopping side. So if you've noticed some performance coming down, this might be part of what is happening. Let's see. That was kind of the bigger thing, like I said, I'd noticed on that. And the interesting piece of this is, so you might be getting disapproved for masking tape or seat covers or something to that effect. And, you know, it's interesting because it could be just triggering off the word mask, which goes back to that COVID-19 negative term list I mentioned that you want to start creating for very broad, specific terms like the word mask in a lot of your shopping campaigns. All right. So again, keeping in line with the feed optimizations, a couple of things that you'll always want to take a look at, especially now, is product title optimizations, product descriptions. Take a look at your shopping campaigns and what your priority levels are. Again, if something isn't performing, you may want to reduce that priority level to reduce your cost exposure in those areas. Again, if you have any automated bidding for enhanced CPC, it may be driving those CPC rates up as it's trying to find that next conversion. Product segmentation, you know, a lot of times people will put out a single feed with a lot of their categorizations in that. What we're finding is that may not be the best way to go. You may want to break out each of your categories into its own category so you have much better control over your budgets and the negative keywords that might be needed. Again, look at your locations. Some places that may have done well for you may not be doing quite as well. And then lastly on this is your smart campaigns. I know we've had a number of smart campaigns that we were running with some of our clients, and they had been doing exceptionally well for us. However, over the last couple of weeks, they seem to have lost some of their smartness, some of the intelligence is gone. And so we had to kind of pull back and readjust on a few of those. Again, so keep a closer eye on those shopping campaigns as time goes on. So real quick, I wanted to touch on a couple of things that we've done, again, to help improve some of our clients' triggers for their products. So, if you have a business that does gift type of delivery or are known for a special type of product, enhance your product titles for that. In the example I'm showing here, one of the things that we did for a client is we really emphasized the fact that these were cookie deliveries, and the amount of triggering we got by adding the word freshly baked cookie delivered was significant. We saw about a 15% increase in our clicks and about a 10% increase in conversions just by letting people know within the product title itself, these items are delivered. And again, we wanted to make sure everything was emphasized with that. Made, like I said, huge difference on that. And then finally, the other thing is not only updating your titles so that you're triggering for the right terms, and you can test adding keywords from that on-site search list that you created. Again, those are your valuable keywords. That's what people are searching for when they get to your website. So if you can add those keywords back into the title of your products, and then potentially even place all of those products into their own very separate and very tightly themed campaign, again, then you're able to control that cost and turn on a dime if something isn't performing quite as well as you would like it to. All right, those are just a few of the things that I wanted to go over and review. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Michelle.
All right, thank you. Phillip, some great timely tips. All right, we're going to take a deep breath right now, switch. All right, good. So this just gives us a break and allows our brain to shift from very technical to talk a little bit more tactical on the email side. So I'm excited to share opportunities that I typically see when evaluating email performance across the many verticals that we see at CohereOne. While there are many home builders on the webinar today, and while these techniques are really geared towards retail, there's a lot of parallels and principles that you can use in your own business. So tip number one is to review your automated emails. This means abandoned cart, abandoned browse, your welcome series, your post-purchase behavior, rate and reviews, and for your home builders, it's the emails that go into your CRM systems are really important to look. Since most of these were created 3 or 4 months ago and they're set it and forget it, the content and creative may not match the environment that we're finding ourselves in. So it's really important to review those trigger or drip programs now. And if I could recommend, just keep your messages really to the point. Think through all the ways your email can be interpreted, provide clear value, as Tim articulated earlier. Every day is Black Friday now. And then just be mindful of your brand voice. Staying with automated feeds, are they on? Are they really on? You would be surprised at how often these feeds go down. And normally there's no sort of ping that will indicate that those are down. And because these have high conversion and open rates, you want to make sure your feeds are working. Number 3, segmentation, dear to my heart. And you can see it's dear to Mara's heart too from Twitter. She clearly articulates that during this pandemic, one of the lessons that she's learned is that way too many brands have her email. And this really is about customer engagement and customer fatigue. For decades, segmentation has been the primary foundation of good customer contact strategies on the print side. I think it's now time for the digital teams, the email marketing teams, to embrace similar tactics. Because customer fatigue is a real issue, and segmentation will play an important role in turning that tide. And these examples show you some of the techniques we use on the print side to really hyper-focus on who we're contacting. So as I go into brands and I do assessments, here's the typical segmentation that I see in terms of email. Often I just see active and inactive subscribers. As a minimum takeaway on email segmentation, I think it's very critical for you to separate buyers from subscribers, or you're looky-loos. And on top of that, I would encourage you to put recency as a flag within the buyer segments. Recency is the most predictive indicator whether a customer will come back and buy from you. Once you have that dialed in, bring in merchandise behavior, especially if you have a wide assortment. It's really important that certain assortments will work better than others. If you're a title or a brand that has both female and males purchasing from you, it's really critical to separate the genders, because your content, creative, and marketing will be vastly different between those two. If you have a wholesale file, could be traditional wholesale, could be trade, interior designers, influencers, ambassadors, separate them out as well, because your messaging will be different and they'll respond differently. Now you have these other activity overlays where I do see some use this as part of their segmentation, but for retail brands, your consumer behavior and purchase behavior is vastly more important than these activity overlays. However, for your home builders, this sort of activity would be important for you. And then the last point, which I think is really critical, and Phillip alluded this to some in his search talk, is geographic. Because certain cities are going in and out of different periods of the crisis, you may want to dial down or dial up communication to those that are impacted or in different parts of their scope. So you may want to bring in geographical information. And you don't need sophisticated or costly programs to do this segmentation. Many email service providers can provide this data for extra cost, and it's worth that extra cost. If you don't want to do that and you have a marketing database, you can do database extracts. And then the last option that you can think about, if you're doing print campaigns, your service bureau can work with you to do weekly uploads in terms of data feed. The key here is really delivering relevant content, maintaining that engagement, and reducing that fatigue. Here's a case study. So when I ran both the digital and e-marketing teams at my last company, I sat down and asked the email manager what sort of segmentation they were doing, and they weren't doing any. So then my next stop was with the head merchant, and I said, listen, if we want to funnel our customers into 2 or 3 main categories, what would it look like? And so we agreed that customers that were purchasing from the home would go into our home category segment. Those that were purchasing for the kitchen or entertaining would go into this bucket. And then, of course, we still had our subscriber file. Then what we did is created one more segment. So for customers that were buying in entertaining and buying in home, they would be recategorized in a new segment called crossover buyers. And then we set out contacts and cadence based on that behavior. So for our crossover buyers, they would get every email that we sent out that week. So if it was 6 or 7, they would get 6 or 7 emails. For those buying in home, they would only get the home emails, they would get the site-wide promotions, and they would get entertaining emails every now and then with the promotion, because we would try to incentivize them to go into a crossover buyer segment. And then we did the same thing on the entertainment side. And of course, we had this large swath of subscribers still, and they would only get emails when we had promotions. They didn't respond well to full ticket emails, so we didn't give them anything but promotions. And then here's the net effect of that. So when we evaluated the segmentation prior to the changes, we delivered about 34 million emails. Open rate, click-through rates, conversion average, nothing great. And then when we analyzed the data after the year of implementing those changes, we did see some differences. We emailed about 7% less. Yet our demand went up 17%, and our conversion went up 16%. And that was really driven by those segments that we created, especially that crossover segment, because you can see they had the highest KPIs of the groups. So the key here was to mail or email more frequently to those customers that were engaged with us and reduce the sends to the subscribers who were not as engaged with us. And by the way, I saved about $25,000 in marketing expense. I could usually put that into another marketing channel, or I could take it to the bottom line. Either way, I encourage you to think about different strategies you can do to reduce your customer fatigue and engage with your customer with relevant content. Tip number 4, shift happens. As customer behavior is changing, brands should adapt as well. And it's not just adapting the merchandise, but it's also being helpful, it's being relevant, being informative, and certainly being authentic. Before you do that first, make sure that your marketing and your merchandise are aligned. Here's another example from a retail that I worked with last year. When I went in to analyze their business, they had 3 main divisions. Category 1 drove about 46% of the company revenue. In Category 2 and Category 3 drove about 31 to 23% of the revenue. But when I analyzed their email performance and their activity, it told me a different story. Here, Category 1, the email volume represented about 41%, yet it was the largest division that was driving demand. Where the true disconnect happened was in Category 2 and Category 3. Category 2, while it drove 31% of company demand, it was only getting 17% of the volume of emails. And then Category 3, which represented 23% of demand, it was getting the bulk of the emails at 42%. So once the client understood that, they changed their strategies, aligned their behavior with the customer behavior, and it dramatically changed their email performance. Wild Things is one of the first brands that I saw that began to pivot the communication based on consumer behavior change. They clearly saw that they were selling more tops than they were bottoms, and so they started creating messaging and content around that. Here with this email, clearly they're selling free pants with a blazer or a top, and they have kind of a nice tongue-in-cheek way about them. And so that made me want to go in to look at some of our clients in the apparel market to see if there were similar shifts. And there were. So on the top chart is women's apparel, and it's the merchandise change in the last 30 days that coincided with the beginning of the worst event that we've experienced here in the last few years. And clearly their bottoms are down as well, not as much as you would expect. Interestingly, shorts are up. But you can see their swim and leisure is definitely down year over year. Obviously, people are not outside and they're not traveling. And their tops are up year over year. And the same trends were happening in the men's apparel, large men's apparel that we work with. Sales to bottoms are down, and obviously their tops are up. So it's just understanding those behavioral shifts that are happening in the environment which customers are finding themselves. And as a brand, you've got to shift with them and change your marketing calendar. So again, when we as brands begin to shift our strategies based on that buying behavior, brands will be in a better and stronger position to offer relevant and timely merchandise. Here's 3 examples that I think do a very good job. So you have Wayfair on the left, known mainly for home furnishing. They've pivoted a little bit to mid-ticket interior products for their home. Harry & David obviously is known for gift giving and gift baskets, but they also have been messaging to the consumer home and shopping and cooking around the kitchen with your family. Free People, an apparel brand, and they've got some health and wellness emails that are going out. And some brands are acknowledging those sheltering at home strategies. They're embracing the reality. So Life is Good t-shirt company, obviously, they've done some rather interesting tongue-in-cheek t-shirts. LL Bean is PJs are not just for bedtime anymore. And then Title IX has an overboard sale. So again, these 3 brands are acknowledging the environment in which they're finding their consumer. And then again, we're quarantine living right now. Schoolhouse, high-end lighting fixtures, pivoting a little towards items for the home. They're offering great tips for spring cleaning, home organization. Again, you've got Native and REI, acknowledging that with their customer and giving them insights and merchandise based on that activity now. And I think it's really important to get them dreaming again, especially if you're a travel or outdoor brand that's in a very different environment than you ever imagined. And I think, you know, because we do know our customers are spending more time at home, obviously, but they're spending more time surfing. If you go in and you look at your own web analytics, you'll see that your traffic numbers are probably up. So they are spending more time at home surfing. They're spending time on education, and they're spending time, believe it or not, planning their own next adventure. I know I am. So these brands, I think, are doing a really good job. Yeti's got a backyard base camp that you can set up and have fun with your family. Osprey's Dream Now, Travel Later. And by the way, get 25% for a discount for your travel. And then Sitka has taken a little bit of a different tact. They have these great ambassador influence videos that they're out emailing and really getting their customer to think about the next hunt. Brands can and should go beyond just selling. By offering interactive or personal connections and stories, you'll connect during a time where you can be helpful and fun. Again, Title IX and Osprey are just doing a phenomenal job, especially in their social media. They've got a workout hour with their staff. Osprey has this great video with this little girl with her favorite Osprey backpack, and she's unpacking her favorite things. Filson is known for apparel and hard goods, yet they've got music and happy hour that's advertised on their website. So as brands, you have to go beyond selling all the time and engaging with your customers. All right, so tip number 5 is abandoned cart. This is usually higher, you know, in my recommendations, but we're in different times, so it's in a different location. But abandoned cart is probably your most important trigger or drip program. You want to make sure that you've got it optimized very well. And the rule of thumb is your abandoned cart program should be driving about 1% of your top line. If it's not, you've got to go back and look at your context and cadence and really amplify your message. Here's a case study. So it's a brand we worked with about 1.5 years ago. They only had 1 email. There was really no cross-selling, no incentives, no branding. So we set out to redo their entire abandoned cart program. So within 6 hours, they got the first email that had the cart, items in the cart. We had promotional messaging, and then we had recommendations. Within 24 hours, we sent out a second email, similar. Within 72 hours, we had a more emotive email, and we upped the discount. And then within 96 hours, we just had in-your-face email trying to get that abandoned cart to convert. And after that, running it for a few months, we increased the conversion and revenue by 40%. And there's another step that you can do, which is supersizing, what we call supersizing your abandoned cart. The volume of your sends is really stunted by the ability to identify anonymous browsers. So you've got to use other tools or other vendors to increase the identification of your anonymous browsers. So again, for this case study, it's a retailer that was doing about 250,000 in monthly traffic with demand just over 26 million. And with their internal email service provider, they were only able to identify 25% of abandoned carts. By putting a foresight tag, which is a vendor that we work closely with, we took that 25% and took the identification up to 55%. That meant we doubled our revenue. So it's important, especially in this really critical drip or trigger campaign, that you really are optimizing it for maximum revenue opportunity. Tip number 6 is a first-time buyer nurture series. Do you know that nearly 70% of customers that have made one purchase from you are unlikely to make a second purchase? It's a number that really hasn't changed that much over the decades. So once you understand that it's a large segment of your database or your customer file, you want to go beyond thinking about that first purchase and how can you get that second and third purchase. So you want to think about it in the life cycle. So again, another Twitter message from our Twitterverse is Leon. You can see here, Leon is really not happy with the brands that are communicating with him. He's getting communications from brands that he hasn't purchased with from a long time. So that's why, you know, when we talk about customer engagement and relevancy, this is really why, because we don't want these sort of messages from Leon. So I like to look at it in both multi-channel perspective, both digital and print. And I also like to look at it in windows, because here's another stat for you. If you don't convert that first-time customer within a 6-month window, again, they're unlikely to purchase from you again. So you want to do whatever you can within that time frame to get that customer to convert from a one-time customer into a two-time customer. And so I like to look at it in windows. So if that second purchase hasn't been done in a 30-day window, give them a low offer. If that customer then moves into a 60-day window without a second purchase, give them a middling offer. And then when you get to that 90-day, yellow flags need to start being waved. And so you try to give them the best offer you can. And so again, here's a couple examples, emails on the left and right. And then Joanne has a postcard as part of their channel of trying to reactivate their customers. Again, another case study that I did with another retailer. Through a 6-month period, we ran a one-time reactivation series, and we did it in both email and postcard. So while email had really high conversion rates in return on ad spend, their universe was so small that it didn't make much of a difference. Because once you're at 253,000 emails that you're emailing to, when you go through the conversion rate, or excuse me, when you start with open rates and conversion rates, your universe rapidly shrinks. Whereas in postcards, you tend to have larger universes of land addresses. It's going into a mailbox, and that actually is proven to be a positive, disruptive channel. People are embracing both catalog, postcard, and print medium like they've never done before. And because of that, I was able to drive a lot more net demand than I could on the email side. So again, you want to think all channels, not just digital. Number 7, VIP shoppers. So as we've talked in blogs and we talked about 2 weeks ago in our webinar, double down on your best customers. Make them feel special. They're spending a lot of money with you. They're loyal. So create an offer that's very exclusive to them, and they'll appreciate it. Number 8, celebrate anniversaries, and it could be any anniversary. I know we have retailers and home builders here, but whether that's an anniversary of a first purchase, a home purchase, it could be marriages, it could be anything. You know, be creative. They're easy to automate, and you'll see, you know, pretty significant conversion rates on them. Number 9, birthday. Everybody loves a birthday. So where you can, try to automate this. The KPIs on it are very strong. And don't worry if you're not collecting that information, because there's third-party vendors out there that can append that data for you, and then you automate it. Very strong numbers. And then lastly, don't forget about those confirmation emails. These are your transactional emails. They're your order confirmation, shipping confirmation, etc. They have around 90% open rates. So it's an optimum time to be able to communicate to your customers in very valuable real estate, additional clearances, additional sales, additional products, personalized product recommendations. You can talk about sister titles. So the key here is to drive revenue. And from this program, you want to drive probably about 0.5% or percent if you're doing it well. And then last thing I added this information is from Publicis, and they just send out from our partner at Epsilon information from their customers and what their customers wanted, communication from the brands that they're engaged with. And you can see here that their customers want to be engaged. They want a sense of community. They want positive content to distract them from going on. So I think that reinforces what we just said here in terms of the top 10 tips. So in closing, I think this is an instructive moment for brands as they go forward on messaging, marketing, and customer engagement strategies. The takeaway is to be helpful, it's to be relevant, it's to be authentic. The brands that do this well and provide great brand and shopping experience will be in a better position for the rebound, and there will be a rebound. So thank you for the opportunity to share this information for you today, and I will hand this over to Erik Martinez from Blue Tangerine.
So who remembers this moment when this all started? Do you remember the gut reaction as the news was changing every day? You didn't know if you'd be allowed to ship your products or open your model homes as states closed down. Toilet paper became scarce. Traffic, leads, and sales plummeted overnight, and our immediate reaction was to cut our marketing budgets. But that's where we were. And here's where we are. We've gone through all the stages of grief. 4 weeks ago, we were in a shock. Today, we're down here looking for realistic solutions to our real world business problems. And I think the tips that Michelle and Phillip outlined are real concrete steps that can help you emerge from this crisis in a stronger position. So there are a couple of things that you guys can do to take advantage of all these channels. Phillip talked about paid search. Michelle talked about email, but use your paid search to drive opportunities to build on your audiences. And here's just some examples. A lot of you do some pop-up intent, try to capture those email addresses. Some of you have chat on your site. Use the opportunity to engage with these customers and build your audience list. And if you can't capture them on arrival, too many Christmas, my mouse is sensitive. If you can't capture them on arrival, capture them when they are about to leave. If they have gotten, particularly when they get deep into the funnel, you have an opportunity to serve up an exit intent and add them to your list, because you'll be able to market to them long after this crisis is over. Surface your reviews and your paid ads. We don't have time today to cover exactly how you go about doing this, but you can send us an email and let us know if you have a question about it. We'll be happy to send you the process for trying to get your reviews and your ads in the paid space to surface and stand out against your competition. And lastly, integrate your abandoned cart with your paid ads. You have the ability to serve up abandoned cart messages on paid search using Google and Facebook. And we have the ability in the home builder world to do that when they get deep into your funnel. But they leave that form, and we have the opportunity to retarget them with another message. So as Tim showed you earlier on, there's room to be hopeful. These steps will allow you to build concrete plans and emerge from this crisis much stronger than you are today. So we want to take a moment.
So go ahead. There, sorry.
I was just going to say, take a moment and say thank you from both Blue Tangerine and CohereOne for attending today's webinar. We have a couple minutes if anybody has any questions.